I did no such thing, Councillor Cutler. Welcome to this evening's meeting of Scrutiny Committee on Monday the 14th of October. That was, of course, slightly postponed from the start of the month. The time is 6:30. My name is Councillor Brooke, Chairperson of the committee. A few housekeeping points as always. This meeting is, as always, being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel, and it will be available later for viewing. Please ensure that mobile phones are on silent or switched off. In the event of an emergency or need to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound and follow instructions from the team. I'd like to welcome the members of the public this evening, so welcome, and any visiting councillors, which we don't have, in attendance today, and I'll invite you forward on when you'll be able to ask your questions. I just want to double check with you both. So we have the public participation, of course, the paper's straight after. So would you like to come up with the public participation point or wait till after the introduction? I'll just bring you up in public. Fab, thank you. I need to point out we have an exempt part of the paper on the agenda tonight. So should members wish to discuss this exempt part, we will go into exempt and ask members to please leave the meeting. When we finish the exempt paper, we will come back into open session and you would be welcome to rejoin us, but of course that would be entirely up to you. As I've already mentioned, so we've got Janet Berry and Emma back here, and there's a separate room for you to go and sit in should you wish to then return. So first of all, Mr. Watson, do we have any apologies and deputy members?
Good evening, Chair members. So we've got apologies from Councillor Bolton, who's been replaced by Councillor Godfrey, apologies from Councillor Reach, who's been replaced by Councillor Power, and finally apologies from Councillor Attrell. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Wallace.
My usual declaration as a member of the County Council.
Many thanks. Any other declarations? No. So my announcements this evening isn't really an announcement, it's a question. Councillor Cutler, at the previous scrutiny meeting, we asked regarding fly tipping. You were going to come back to us with some information, and I wanted to ask where that might be, if I may.
Yes, in fact, it's very timely because Simon Howson sent me through a very detailed analysis of fly tipping by size and by quarter, and you know, each individual clear up rate, which we're proposing to put onto the Q2 report. And that would be quite an effective way of, you know, sort of adding in extra information there as a sort of an appendix to that that particular KPI. And I think you may find that that is sufficient. I can forward it on to the committee if he's happy with me moving, you know, that information out before that paper's published, if that's helpful to you.
That would be helpful, please, and then we can decide whether that is satisfactory for us or whether we then at the next meeting ask for the task and finish group to be forwarded. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cutler. Can the minutes from the last meeting please be agreed as a correct record? Do we agree? Lovely, thank you. Okay, public participation then. So you're both speaking on Bar and Depot. So Janet Berry, if I could invite you forwards first, please. You will have 3 minutes as always. Thank you.
Thank you for this chance to speak on behalf of Highcliffe Forum for Community Action. The Forum has responsibility to help achieve the Highcliffe Community Plan actions. Para 6.7 says that the depot proposal responds to all elements of the community plan. The community plan has actions around a community-run hub and shop, activities for children and young people, and new social and leisure activities. The depot site is realistically the last piece of land where a hub could be developed. Our recent petition confirmed this remains of high importance to residents, many of whom would volunteer in it. Para 11.2 seems to summarise the Bar End framework rather than the community aspirations in the Highcliffe plan. Para 6.5 and 12.4 refer to the considerable facilities built recently in the Highcliffe area for the benefit of all residents in the Winchester district, including Highcliffe. The proposal for a community hub addresses particular aspirations of the Highcliffe community. Regarding the KGV Pavilion, Highcliffe Forum responded to the 2021 consultation and spoke at council meetings at Cabinet in June 2018, Town Forum in January 2020 and June 2021, requesting community involvement in the pavilion's design to ensure as much community use as possible, for example, for storage space for equipment for environmental work and for a multi-use space for activities such as exercise classes. As it stands, the club room is available for occasional hire, but is no substitute for a community-run hub. Some changes may enable it to be more usable. The Regulation 18 local plan consultation referenced in 6.6 was held in November and December 2022 at the same time as the council's separate consultation on the depot site. This presented, as per 11.5, options from potential developers in 6 categories, many differing substantially from the mainly residential and healthcare proposal in Regulation 18. Highcliffe Forum responded to the depot consultation with suggestions from the community plan, including a community-run hub, an improved local bus service, and follow-on workshops involving the local community. This latter request echoed a 350 signatory petition to Council in January 2022, requesting an inclusive community engagement exercise to help determine the potential of the depot site. Highcliffe Forum remains keen to be involved in discussions around future developments and to ensure that residents are fully involved. It would be grateful if the full results of the March and November 2022 depot consultations were published, including numbers of attendees and comments and suggestions made, so it can consider these going forward. Also, will the design framework's recommendation that it is reviewed in 5 years' time in 2023 to reflect the impact of the new sport and leisure centre and any other committed or completed developments in or near the area still happen? Thank you.
Many thanks for your comments, and they will be noted. Emma Back, would you like to come forwards now? Thank you.
Thank you. As a city resident involved in discussions about Bar End sports facilities over many years, I wanted to offer some historic context to the depot redevelopment. In 2015, the council agreed its preferred option for a new leisure centre at Bar End and consulted surrounding neighbourhoods on their priorities for the area, which included a small shop and function rooms. The 2016 Highcliffe Community Plan echoed this. The council then proposed building the new leisure centre on the protected KGB playing fields. Local residents and sports groups advocated for the garrison ground to be used instead and for the Bar End depot site to host car parking and other complementary facilities to maximise remaining open space. An area master plan was requested, with the Bar End Forum set up to support this. Crucially, the depot site was specifically excluded from these consultations. In the resulting 2018 Bar End Design Framework, the text on the depot relates to landscape buffers, building heights and a possible convenience store. The framework also showed the boxing club relocated to the sports stadium buildings and 2 old KGB pavilions being refurbished. Cabinet approved this version of the framework at their meeting on 6 June 2018, where a separate paper confusingly proposed building a new KGB pavilion to host the boxing club. During 2021, plans for the new pavilion were agreed with a social room upstairs, but no boxing club or other community spaces. In early 2022, a residents' petition, as Janet mentioned, requested inclusive public engagement to shape the depot redevelopment, and in response to an elected members' question at full council, the portfolio holder stated that any development must be guided by the Design Framework 2018, including provision for mixed uses, green buffer zones, height restrictions, a convenience store, community facilities, and permeability through the site to the Winchester Sport and Leisure Park. The press release for the March 2022 drop-in consultation on the depot site used the same wording. Unfortunately, however, the phrase community facilities had disappeared by autumn 2022 when residents were consulted on a long list of options put forward by developers, including an ice rink, paddle courts, a transport museum and other leisure, retail, residential, healthcare and light industrial uses. The output from this consultation, showing mixed use and leisure options as the most popular alongside a shop, emerged only in autumn 2023. The council then opted to focus the full tender on residential and healthcare uses alongside a convenience store. So we've gone from the depot complementing the sport and leisure park and offering community facilities and a shop to a development focused on homes for older people and a shop. It's a great shame the requirement for community facilities has been lost, and committee members can only scrutinise the deal in front of them. But as you do so, I'd urge you to consider how the development will link to and serve the wider neighbourhood, whether shared communal areas will be provided, how access and car parking will be managed, particularly for the convenience store, and what this means for leisure centre users. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we've noted your comments as well, Emma, so thank you for coming this evening. Would we like a brief introduction on the paper? Who would like to introduce the Bar End paper for us this evening? Thank you, Councillor Todd, for coming forward. So it's recommended that the committee scrutinise and comment on the proposals as we go through this report, CAB 3447, which to be considered tomorrow at the Cabinet meeting. So Councillor Todd, if you'd like to commence your intro.
Yes, certainly. I'm very happy to do so. Thank you very much indeed for the chance to put forward this paper today. I hope you find it fairly self-explanatory. This site has been listed for disposal for some time to enable its redevelopment. After a thorough and rigorous process, we now have a preferred bidder. The report outlines the planning policy, public engagement, marketing and bidder selection process undertaken to secure that partner. It's great to be moving this project to the next stage. This will deliver real benefits for the immediate area and for our city. It ends the blight of the derelict depot site. It brings new housing, including new affordable housing, a much wanted convenience store, better pedestrian routes, a new state-of-the-art care home for our city. We will, I'm sure, have a chance to discuss how things fit with previous documentation. But let's be absolutely clear that the Highcliffe Community Plan was very clear that the critical element in the so-called shop hub was the shop. To quote, having a shopping facility was the highest priority out of a list of 22 factors that would most improve the area. Similarly, if you read the details of the Bar End framework, you will see that the reference to community facilities is mainly in the context of the new pavilions. But I'm sure we can get into that in more detail if that's what people would like. I'm joined here today by Simon Hendy, the Strategic Director, and Jeff Coe, the Corporate Head of Asset Management, who will be very happy to take your questions and answer any queries that you may have about the proposals in front of you today.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Do either Mr. Hendy or Mr. Coe have anything you'd like to add? No? Okay, we shall go into questions then. So once we get to the exempt section, I will ask you if anybody has any questions on exempt. But for now, let's see if we have any questions on the main body of the report, pages 15 to 27. Do we have any questions on the main body of the report, please? Councillor Godfrey.
It's mentioned throughout, but the Reg 19 allocation for this site is for 30 residential units and on a mixed use site. Can we be clear what exactly is being proposed? Because my impression from the main part of the paper is that is not what is being proposed.
Who would like to pick that one up? Councillor Todd?
Yeah, I mean, the paper is clear. It talks about 56 senior living units, a 72 bed care home and 38 affordable housing apartments. So it is in excess of what was written in the planning guidance.
It is not mixed use. it is not in line with the Reg 19 and the Reg 18 proposal, as was pointed out in the public submission. Are we not in danger of falling foul of our own planning people in delivering a residential site with a very modest retail element and no obvious healthcare, and I can't see any complementary activity or content between what is proposed and the neighbouring leisure centre, which was the whole purpose of this, the use of this site. Older people do not tend to use the leisure centre. So, where is the alignment with our planning policy?
Councillor Todd.
Well, as you recall, at full council, when we discussed the local plan, the Conservatives, and I think you might have seconded the motion, said that the entire site should be housing only and not be mixed use. But in practice, what we have in front of us today is the housing that I referenced. Sorry, that's what I thought you were asking about, as well as a 4,300 square foot convenience store. Now, a store and housing, when I last look, is a mixed use because a store is not a house. It is a different use. It is a commercial use, so it is mixed use. It is consistent with the planning policy. And the idea that older people shouldn't use the leisure centre suggests that you've slightly lost sight of the inclusive use that we're aiming to achieve with our leisure centre, particularly when we have a hydrotherapy pool. The idea that that a leisure centre would be something that's not of interest to older people, I find bizarre in the extreme.
That's a lady.
Thank you. You quoted a number of units that are going to be available, but aren't these at the absolute minimum size that is allowable? Because I visited one of these sites recently and the single rooms were 70 square metres and that was really very, very small. So if we get the developer coming back to us with a viability issue, that the only way they can change it around is by going higher. And one of the stipulations we always had was that it wouldn't be built higher than the leisure sector, to keep it in context.
Absolutely not. I mean, this proposal is subject to planning consent. So things such as height restrictions, size of rooms, the requirements that we have of any developer will apply just as strongly here as they do anywhere else. The planning decision is made independently from the executive side of the council, as it should be. It's a regulatory decision. I think your point in terms of viability is that if the scheme does not deliver what's in the contract, then the contract falls. But I'm sure that this is one where our property colleagues, maybe Mr. Coe or Mr. Hendy, is able to provide a bit more reassurance.
Thank you, Chair. I think we were fighting over who was going to press the button. I think there's two things. Councillor Lamy refers, I think, to the residential care home and the size of the rooms in the residential care home. Oh, senior living. Well, that'll be subject to the council's planning policies in terms of room sizes. Residential care home, there's CQC standards for the size of rooms there, which will have to be complied with to achieve CQC registration. And in terms of the non-residential care home, the senior living properties, then that's be subject to council's planning policies, as any other residential development would be.
The point that I was really coming back to was once they got planning permission, they then got the facility then to come back to us and say that site is not delivering the profits we want, therefore it's not viable and we will need to change it. So I need to be assured that there's some safeguard in there that stops it being forced to go higher against what we would normally want.
Thank you, Chair. The report makes it clear there's a floor on the minimum price of Well, there's a floor on the minimum price in the report. Clearly, through the planning process, there's a major reduction in terms of the number of units that can be developed through the planning process, and that floor will be impacted because of that. But it's very clear how that minimum price works and what can be deducted from that in terms of onerous costs. By the same token, if there are savings and some of those costs have been identified, then that minimum price will increase.
And the other point I wanted to ask was about the convenience store, because the size that's being quoted at the moment is the absolute minimum that Tesco's or Sainsbury's would accept. So is there a chance of making that slightly bigger? Because that is quite an area down there that needs some help from us.
Our intention is to have a size that Tesco or Sainsbury's would accept, but I don't know if Mr. Coe wants to provide any, or Mr. Hendy wants to provide any professional perspective on that.
It's a good point, but the area is one that satisfies a much wider market than that, and there are currently 3 bidders wanting the space, so it meets current demand.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you. Yeah, I was a little confused to find that the site had been sitting unused for 7 years. That seems like an awfully long time, when it could be delivering value to the community, either directly through new community facilities or indirectly through capital receipts. Is this, obviously I haven't been on the council for as long as some of the other members, but is this normal because for a site to sit unused for such a long period of time?
I can probably answer that, Councillor. It predates my joining the council, but it was a site that was used by contractors building the leisure park. So it's a very essential part of the construction programme. It's since the leisure park's been open, it's been used by contractors for storing materials for our new homes developments across the borough. And it houses the Bone Store, which is the Hampshire Cultural Trust's facility, which we're decanting from site. I think there was the pandemic caused a hiatus in the development market, so we couldn't take it to market during the pandemic. Build costs went up, quite apart from the market collapsing for new construction. So there are reasons for the delay, and the October 20 cabinet approval delegated authority to the strategic director to time the marketing of the site at the right moment. So we did that to correspond with the increase in demand for this sort of site from developers to optimise our capital receipt.
It was also used as the depot for the Barfield Close car park. So for much of the period, it was being used as a depot site for construction in the immediate area. And then another big period of the time was the pandemic, which wasn't the greatest of times for doing development projects.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's that wasn't clear in the report actually, because it did actually. I think it says in one part of the report it actually wasn't used for 7 years. So thank you for the clarification.
Councillor Batho?
Thank you. I'd just like to take us to point 8.1 in the report, where it refers to the development including senior living and elderly residential healthcare. It then states that there will be a liberation of family homes as a result of people moving in. Just wondered if, which I find is an admirable sort of aspiration. Are there any contractual obligations that residents who take up living there will have actually been in the local district area? Or is this just sort of an assumption because of geographical the proximity that that's more likely to be the case? Thank you.
It's a fact in cases if you have a resident living within the district and they move into a senior living apartment, it does liberate their property, but of course not every resident moving in is going to be living within the district. So you can't legislate for that, and it's certainly not a requirement of the sale contract that should be a requirement. I think most developers would walk away from that kind of condition.
Thank you. Councillor Godfrey.
The report makes reference to, in the risk section, long stop date. The experience of long stop dates is patchy in this authority. Can a long stop date be enforced in this case? And what is the likelihood of the terms that would be required?
This is a provision to mitigate the financial impact on the developer of a prolonged period of planning. So it allows for an adequate period for submission of the planning application and hearing the planning application, and for that application to go to appeal as well. But at some point, the developer would have to cut their losses and walk away if they don't get planning consent. So it's for the developer. It's also for us. But the purchaser in this case is a commercial operator, very used to navigating their way through local planning authority situations. So it's the onus will be on the LPA to really respond in an appropriate manner.
The LPA? Why would the LPA be involved?
Because it's to accommodate the planning application.
But the long stop date is going to be part of the contract between the council and the purchaser. Presumably this is something which would then allow us to claw back the property if the purchaser was not able to obtain planning permission without any additional costs. Is that going to be enforceable and achievable?
Absolutely enforceable. It's a standard provision in any conditional sale contract. So it's a sale conditioned on the developer getting planning. If they don't get planning, they walk away, and if they don't get planning within that time frame, both parties can terminate the contract, and that is fully enforceable. Yes.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Godfrey? You're looking.
I know the answer, but I'm just wants Ms. Coates for a minute to say it in public. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
I'd like that. I was trying to understand why have we chosen to take capital risk, or why are we choosing to go down a path of taking a capital receipt on this site rather than renting out the land and getting a recurring income for the council?
Councillor Todd, I think that one's you.
I think in this, I mean, firstly, obviously, once we decided in 2020 that that's how we're going to run the procurement, then that train was underway. I think I'm not entirely sure what an arrangement would be where somebody else was building the buildings and we were expecting to get a ground rent off them. So I think it is normal in these circumstances to go for a capital receipt, but I think this is one where Mr. Hendy or Mr. Coe are both more expert in. I mean, the reason we will have done it is to achieve greater value ultimately for the council, but there are other reasons as well, and I'm sure they'll be outlined.
So it's a good point, because we could have just let the site to open storage market, and the open storage rental value of that site is about 120,000, 100 to 120,000 a year, but that's a lot less than the annualized sum of a capital receipt that we are getting by some factor. So it's actually more beneficial to take a capital receipt.
Yes, Chair, if I could just add, it is an exempt part of the agenda, but the financial appraisal exempt Appendix 3 does show that in effect the impact of the capital receipt is improving the revenue position of the council over the life of the Winchester Sport and Leisure Centre borrowing. So I understand the question, but actually it does generate a revenue benefit for the council, although we're receiving a capital receipt.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Chairman, could we explore why the residents feel the KGV pavilion is not meeting the need for community events? I'm well familiar with the travails of running a community building and finding trustees and maintaining that building. But it does feel that we have missed a trick somehow in meeting the needs of the residents. Thank you.
I'm not sure if Councillor Todd's best place to answer that, or if we should call Emma and Janet back.
Maybe at this point I should just read verbatim what it says about community run hub and shop in the original Highcliffe Community Plan. Because it was so hub/shop. Quote, investigate the possibility of setting up a community run hub and shop. It's a reasonable thing. What was the research that sat behind that? 38% of household survey respondents indicated they would regularly use a shop, and 33% would volunteer to help run one. Having a shopping facility was the highest priority out of a list of 22 factors that would most improve the area. Comments in the themed meetings demonstrated that residents wanted greater opportunities for social activities in Highcliffe, offering opportunities to meet their neighbours. I think as a place to meet, the new pavilion is perfectly adequate. Anybody who's been there, it's got a nice sort of tea, coffee making facility area, a nice room, disabled access. It may not be, you know, an all singing and dancing community centre, but realistically, that has never been part of the plan. I mean, certainly if you look at, for example, by the time we were at the stage of the design framework, the only references to community use at that point are talking about the areas, pavilions and play areas. And of course, as you know, we've just refurbished the play areas. So community use, even by the stage of the design framework, is very much framed in terms of the pavilions and the wider area. Obviously, any community is always going to be looking to get better facilities. That's only reasonable. But I think the offer that the facilities that have been created, and there was community input on how that was developed, are good. They're better than many other areas of the city currently have. And taken as a whole, the facilities that the community have immediate access to, you know, with this fantastic, one of the best leisure centres in the country, the new pavilion, the new play facilities, the new shop that will be coming, all of these together, I think, add up to a much strengthened position for this part of the district. And we need to make sure that all parts of the city and of the district are also considered fairly as we think where to put extra resource from this point onwards.
Councillor Todd, that piece you just read to us, can I ask you which of the consultations that was from? Because there was a comment from Janet earlier saying, could we have the results of the consultation? I wondered if they're available somewhere.
I've just quoted the first one was the Highcliffe Community Plan from 2016. Okay, so I don't have that. There's a lot of facts and figures referred to throughout that. Obviously, aside from the fact that the shop comes back as the #1 priority for the community, and then the reference to community use comes again in a paper agreed in 2017. So again, it was the community plan. The design framework was agreed, I think, in 2019, was it? 2018. And again, the community uses by then are very much framed in terms of the pavilion in particular, but also the only references to a community hub are actually referring to the leisure facilities in that particular document.
Thank you, Councillor.
So the specific, I'm not entirely sure. What's the specific set of information that you were asking about?
I was actually asking because there was a comment from Janet Berry to say that the consultation in 2022, particularly with the feedback, was not published from that, and if there was a possibility for them to see it. And I also would query, given as we as a council talk so much about how much things have changed since COVID and 2020, that perhaps the community needs in 2016 would be somewhat outdated.
Well, let's not forget that the community plan was written in a context where no leisure centre was planned to be built anywhere near Highcliffe. So yes, I think that's a very fair point. So when it's talking about No, I don't think in 2016 had we decided. Well, bizarrely then, the Highcliffe Community Plan literally makes no reference to a leisure centre anywhere in it, unless I've failed in my, no, sorry, there are 2 references to a leisure centre. It says, here we go, relocation of the leisure centre. Since this process was carried out, it has emerged that in an area adjacent to the Winchester Sports Stadium has identified by Winchester City Council as its preferred site for a new sports and leisure complex for Winchester. Any further progress on this will be reflected in the action plan schedule, and any decisions will need to make adequate reference to this report. So in other words, all the research that informed the Highcliffe Community Plan predated the decision to have a leisure centre in the area. So I think your point to say we need to be careful not to give it too much weight, because an awful lot has changed since then, is a fair one. And again, at that stage, there was no specifics about the particular community facilities that were going to be built with the fantastic new pavilion that's been built at KGV.
So coming back to the question about the consultations in 2022, is it possible for the feedback for that to be published, or was it published or communicated back to residents anyway?
It was communicated back to residents at a further meeting in the September of 23.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. It was where in September 23?
So we had an engagement session in the Guildhall in September 23, which Councillor Todd and Simon Hendy were at, and the results of that were fed back in summary to residents.
I think we had some information boards at that meeting, and I'm sure we can put them on the website. And just in terms of actually the 2016, there was only one reference to the word pavilion, which again has since been massively upgraded, the old one's demolished, and a fantastic new pavilion, which is in a different league to what was there before. And the words were, the Winchester Amateur Boxing Club meets at the Garrison Ground Pavilion. So that's the reference to the pavilion. So neither the pavilion nor the leisure centre were actually were considered as part of the development of the Highcliffe Community Plan.
Thank you. No, not you yet, Councillor Lehman. We have some questions before we come to you. Councillor Wallace.
Right. Climate emergency. So there's strong statements in paragraph 1.1 about the scheme will incorporate best practice above building regulation energy efficiency standards. This is a great statement, very easy to make, but how is it being implemented, as it cannot be achieved through planning requirements, as you know?
This is a disposal of land. It's not an opportunity for us to specify building standards on a developer that has a product in the marketplace already. We're not building our own council houses here. So I think the opportunity to impose stringent requirements on these matters is constrained to some large degree. What the purchaser is intending to do is to exceed Part L of the building regs requirements, and for a disposal of land that is sufficient to meet obligations and commitments. Going further than that is going to interfere with the planning process, and will also interfere with all of the developers that bid on this business model. So we are somewhat limited in what we can enforce in these scenarios.
That makes sense to me. So I wonder if maybe the wording of that section should be adjusted to reflect that. There is no, we cannot guarantee, I mean, we're saying the proposed scheme will incorporate best practice, but I mean, we don't know what they're actually going to deliver. We can't make them either through planning or through the sale of the site. We can't make a developer do it to best practice. So much as I'd like to. So that section feels a bit misleading, in all honesty.
I think that's a really good point, Councillor Morris. Thank you. Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. If I may just return to the community hub issue again. Just to be very clear, that a few weeks ago, the council considered the petition from a large number of residents seeking improvement to the community facilities in the Highcliffe area. And a holding response was given at that council meeting. Then wait and see the bar and paper. Well, am I right in thinking that the bar and paper summarises that response in 12.4 in saying there will be no further consideration of community hub, additional community hub facilities for the Highcliffe area?
I don't think that is exactly what it says. What it says is that there is not an intention to reopen the procurement process, having considered the various pieces of evidence we have from the consultations over time and the other questions that were raised when I responded at the full council.
But there is no further consideration on this or any other stream of work to deliver further community hub activity.
What was said at full council was that we would consider this request within the context of this proposal. That was the response that we made, and we have done so.
Mrs. Taylor, please.
May I assist? Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. Councillor Godfrey. Indeed, the members of the public here with us tonight did present a petition at council, and the decision at council that time was to refer the matter to Cabinet. And as is set out in the report invites the comments of the Scrutiny Committee on the matters set in the report and raised at the petition, namely, I believe, although I'm happy to be corrected if it's broader than this, the presence of a community hub or not at the Bar End Depot. And this matter and the comments made by Scrutiny tonight will be considered by Cabinet tomorrow, and Cabinet will be considering the matters raised in the petition as part of their consideration, which will bring that petition to a close. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. It was just going back on the engagement, and Janet Berry asked if she could have copies, but I see also in 6.2, as part of the marketing process for the Bar End Depot site, and I think Mr. Coe, you mentioned it, the council arranged for Highcliffe communities. Is that what Janet Berry was referring to? I'm not quite sure. Is that correct?
Yes, Councillor Clear, that's what she's seeking the feedback from. Councillor Laming.
Thank you. As probably the only councillor here tonight that sat on all the committees for the leisure sector, we were certainly discussing the move to Bar End back when we had the ISGs that were running. The only stumbling block was the negotiation between the council and Tesco. So that happened, I think it was 2013, 2014. And is the purchaser aware of the limitations on access to that site? Because it's always known that we couldn't access it from the leisure centre, and highways were reticent on actually accessing the site from Bar End Road, and that only left Millen Road, which has got severe problems there as well. So it does create one or two problems there. And as far as I can see, there's no allocation for parking anywhere on that site that we've been discussing.
Those are all planning issues, and the developer is aware of the highway's position in the area. I would be, just coming back to the question of timing. I think you're right. There were ideas being discussed about potential location, but let me remind you that the exact words of the Highcliffe Community Plan are these: since this process was carried out, it has emerged that an area adjacent to the Winchester Sports Stadium has been identified by Winchester City Council as its preferred site for a new sports and leisure complex for Winchester. That's very clear that as far as Highcliffe Community Plan is concerned, it was not working on the assumption there was definitely going to be a new leisure centre at the at Highcliffe, in the Highcliffe area.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. GP practices across the area are at bursting point. A care home requires a higher level of GP support than general housing. Has the council spoken with the ICB about this proposal and whether there is capacity within the local GP practices to cover a new care home?
We haven't, as a landowner, for fairly obvious reasons. That will be incumbent upon the care home operator to have done that, and they would, as well as consulting with them, they would have gone to CQC in terms of demands and requirements for the area. So that's not something we would traditionally get involved in. The site, there's no requirement for the site to be master planned. This is market-led development. So I would imagine that homework has been fully commissioned and satisfied. There were two bids from care home operators, which suggests to me that the market is pretty strong for that, and that won't be an issue for them.
I think it's also important to point out, of course, that under this administration, we've worked with the NHS and developers in order to put in place a brand new state-of-the-art GP surgery, replacing the current one at St Clement's. And there are methods through the planning process where the NHS is able to ask for capital support if they have particular proposals that need to be adjusted. I mean, it's also important to look at the overall picture of care home provision. There is a rapid increase in we have an aging population in the area. The housing strategy is clear that we need housing for all ages, and so we are going to need increased care home provision. And what we're also seeing at the same time is the care homes that are no longer fit for purpose are being closed and decommissioned. So I think we as taxpayers, dare I say, including care home residents as taxpayers and older people as taxpayers, it's a reasonable expectation to the ICB to say we have an ageing population. We are going to have the housing that is suitable for that ageing population, and we will happy to work with you to make sure that you have the right provision for that ageing population. That, frankly, is the way round it should be.
Can I just add, this is not total speculation, but I think there's a case to say that delivering primary care through care home provision is a far more efficient way than having residents living in the community. It's channeled, it's managed, so individual care needs are far better catered for in that environment than, let's suppose, there were 72 residents living in the community.
Yeah, I'm not sure all GP practices would agree with you. And it's great that we've got a nice shiny new building, but the problem with GP practices at the moment, as most people are aware, is not the building, it's the actual number of GPs. There aren't enough GPs. So you can have a nice shiny new building, but if you haven't got a GP to see them, it doesn't work. So it's great that we think that maybe they've done it, they've checked with the ICB, but maybe it'd be a good idea just to go back and just check properly and confirm whether they've actually spoken to the ICB and that they are aware that this could be on the way, on the cards.
I somehow suspect the care home developers know how to do this, but since it is, it is something that would be expected, well, through any serious business case, but also through the planning process. So again, we are disposing of the land. The risk of whether they are able to get all the necessary permissions to go ahead with a care home are not with us, they're with the purchaser.
Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. I'm not a semantic expert, but I do know that a care home is not a health facility. There is no responsibility of the ICB for care homes in this county. Care homes are a residential unit which caters for all the members of the population. A nursing home has health facilities in that, and a care home is not a primary health facility, which makes me confused about what the purpose of this paper is, which says it includes healthcare provision, and I'm not sure we could touch on any healthcare provision in this, and welcome clarification of that, because that was one of the expectations when the significant extra investment in the hydrotherapy pool was considered, that complementary healthcare facilities would be developed within the depot, and they seem to be absent. So how is this healthcare in this proposal, and how is it complementary to the leisure park?
Councillor Godfrey, I'd imagine they send paracetamol at the shop. Can we come back for an answer, please?
Well, I think the first thing to say in terms of complementary use, the one thing we do know is that the hydrotherapy pool is at capacity. So if we added something that put more demand in it, we would not be able to meet it. So there is no capacity in the hydrotherapy pool at the moment. My understanding is very clearly that it is at full usage. I don't know if you want to take a wider view.
Well, I think I question the assumption about healthcare provision, because this emanates from an expression that was voiced for some years by Hobbs Rehabilitation, who had a requirement in the area, and the community were asked how they felt about such a facility on site that would have used the hydrotherapy pool, but at no point has that been enshrined in any policy anywhere. So it was a requirement at the time in the marketplace. They were given the opportunity to bid on the site, but at no time have we said that there must be healthcare provision on the site. I think the second point is that care homes is a generic reference to elderly residential care, and often includes a proportion of nursing or dementia. So we don't know at this stage whether the care operator is going to be offering pure care or care plus nursing care. That model works in the community. So if you're saying that nursing care is healthcare, it may well be that box is ticked.
Madam Chairman, the purpose of this paper on page 15 of the pack, on page 1 of his report, says the redeveloping the former bar and depot site will, sub item 6, include essential healthcare provision. It doesn't say may, it says will, but it's not. There's no evidence that it's going to. So why are we making a central part of the purpose which isn't going to be delivered?
Right, I think it's probably arguing over words, because it is care for that demographic is always incorporating their health needs. So it's a separate use class to residential, so it's clearly not just residential, and there's a reason for that. It doesn't attract affordable housing provision, so it's separate from residential, and it's separate. And if you look at care packages for individual residents, you'll find varying degrees of care, health care, not just their physical well-being, but their mental well-being. So I think it's probably arguing about nothing really, for me. So
I have to say, I agree with Councillor Godfrey that this sounds like a guarantee of that, and we have no such thing. And I would like the Scrutiny Committee to refer to this and say that that gets amended. Councillor Laney, you had a quick.
Like some reassurance now, because the business plan that was put together for the leisure centre, and I hate to say it, but Guy Ashton did a fantastic job on that, was based around, for the hydrotherapy pool, the amount of custom coming from the rehabilitation centre that was looking to go there. Now, they are still a main user of the centre, and if they went off and built somewhere else, that could have a detrimental effect on the numbers being used at the centre at the moment. Because I know we're running at 95% during the week and 85% at the weekend, but we must make sure that we protect our investment in the leisure centre. So I need reassurance on the levels that we will maintain. We spent a lot of time and a lot of effort getting a world-class facility there. I want to maintain it.
Councillor Todd?
Yeah. As things stand today, there is very high capacity usage of the hydrotherapy pool. It's not just by one organisation. It's not our role to double guess what other private sector organisations are going to be doing in the future. But I think it is a safe assumption, as we have an ageing population, we know that people are living longer with disability, for example, that the demand for hydrotherapy is going to go up. What we can't do is double guess the provision. And what we can't do is double guess who the providers are going to be. And at a situation where it is in full usage, we also can't double guess through this procurement process how disposal would work in order to support hydrotherapy. This is one where, you know, there is no capacity in the system to, well, how can I put this? We're dealing with a hypothetical here. The reality is the hydrotherapy pool is in full usage as things stand today. So designing for a hypothetical which hasn't happened and isn't happening is not, I think, a prudent thing to be doing. And it's certainly not one that we could easily factor into any procurement process in a way that was even vaguely legal, I think.
Do I follow that up then? If we're running at such a high capacity, there's no room left now to expand the centre at all, is there? If we're going to.
There's what you'd have to expand the depot, the leisure centre, by a lot in order to even reach the depot site. So I'm not entirely sure that that's a safe assumption. I mean, if we were in the world of expanding the leisure centre, and I don't think that's something that's in our business plan, there's quite a large car park in the immediate area, and I think the issue we would have to address is how to reduce the number of car journeys to that particular site while maintaining usage, and also maybe think about how we repurposed and targeted the other car parks in the area. But I don't think we need the depot for a theoretical expansion, which would be a vast increase in the size of the current leisure centre before it got anywhere near the depot land.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Wallace?
Thank you. Again, this one might be, I'm sure other people understand this one better than me. Can you explain what's meant by the unfinanced capital expenditure for the Winchester Sports and Leisure Park?
Yeah, well, let's see if I get it right. And then, in essence, the leisure centre was paid for out of available reserves. But because of local government finance rules, you have to charge an interest rate for it. So look at that. Yeah.
Councillor Cutler, we'll just cut Councillor Todd off
But if
there.
you get a
can-
capital receipt, you
Councillor Todd, we're asking the expert.
can ask the expert.
Oh, you're not.
Sorry, when the leisure centre was built, it required borrowing of around about £40 million. We did not need to borrow externally for that. We could borrow internally from our own resources. When one does that, we have to apply minimum revenue provision, which is the equivalent of paying it back over the period of its lifespan with interest. So if we receive a capital receipt, we can pay off some of that borrowing, even though it's internal borrowing, and reduce that minimum revenue provision, which is an annual cost to the council. So in the situation that we know we are going to be in over the next few years of quite a lot of pressure on our revenue, general fund revenue account, it is very effective use of a capital receipt to reduce, to effectively pay off some of the leisure centre. And that was going back to one of the earlier questions of why we chose this approach. That was one of the main reasons behind it, was to cover some of that leisure centre borrowing. So this represents really good value for the council. Before we slip into the detail, I mean, the detail of it obviously is in the exempt appendix.
Thank you for that explanation. I just wanted to kind of follow up on that. I mean, is this it can be shown as more funding for the? Is this more funding for the leisure centre? I'm trying to say, you know, rather than is this more funding going towards the leisure centre at the expense of the rural area? And I know how you explain the empathy and all that balancing.
Quite the reverse.
But if we're not counting it, if we're not counting it,
As Councillor Stott says, it's quite the reverse, because it cuts down our revenue requirement of minimum revenue. It allows that money to be spent wherever we choose to spend it. We have spent £40 million on the leisure centre. That's spent. We have not borrowed from the Public Works Loan Board for that. We've used our internal resources. But when we get to a point of needing to borrow, that will, where the borrowing sits, really could be anywhere, but effectively what we're doing is reducing that internal borrowing by taking a capital receipt. I think that's the important thing. That releases money annually within the revenue account.
Effectively, that means that we have more money to spend across the rest of the district, or savings that may not need to be made to the same degree across the rest of the district as a result of this particular move. It's effectively taking a Winchester asset and releasing funds for the district.
Thank you. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I wish to, Councillor Godfrey's obviously far too young to have investigated what happens in a care home. But but I can reassure the committee that there are many aspects of healthcare in the care system. There are dementia wings, there are nursing care wings, and there are also preventative benefits to having co-location of senior living units and care homes. It enables people to move from senior living into care, or maybe one half of a good couple, without having to get used to a new environment. And it enhances the visiting capacity. It enables the person in the care or dementia unit to still be part of that family. But there is always healthcare in a care home. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. I disagree. There's always healthcare in a care home. And that statement says there will be, when I think it's our assumption that there will be, rather than we can guarantee that, which is why I feel that that statement Councillor Godfrey raised is, it just needs to be, there should be, it is likely that, it is probable, but we can't say it is certain that. So thank you, Councillor Powell. Does anybody have any, oh, Councillor Buffy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I had some questions about the comparisons and about the sort of evaluation that was done. Is that something you prefer to be done in exempt rather than in this session? Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next section. So can it wait till the next section that we're moving to, which is the planning bit? Thank you. Okay. Right, so now we're moving on to Appendix 1, the map. I'm guessing nobody has any questions on the map. No? So we'll come on to Appendix 2, which is page 31 to 59. Does anybody have any questions on Appendix 2, which is design framework section that we have in there at the moment of the Sport and Leisure Park? No? I just wanted to pull up onto this section, if I may. We were discussing access and how it will be difficult to access from the Sport and Leisure Park, etc. And there was also a comment made earlier about access and parking for the shop. Living on a development where the only access for deliveries to the shop is via small residential streets that have parking. I know it's part of the planning process, but do we have any sort of control over access to that to limit the impact on the housing that will be there other than through the planning process?
I mean, the Bar End framework is absolutely clear that there is no access from Milland Road. And I mean, I don't think there's even a wide enough way to send a truck in from Milland Road. And we're not selling them the land to let them do that.
So how will the shop get its deliveries?
Well, if you have a look at the Bar End framework, it's pretty clear that access is via the leisure centre car park. Is via the leisure centre access. So it goes in, you turn left, basically. And if you go there today, you can actually see where the access point is designed to be.
Thank you. Right, so does anybody have any questions?
Page 43 for those interested, by the way.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Does anybody have questions on the exempt, please? Sorry, Councillor Wallace, you have a question.
Yeah, sorry. Just unfortunately, Councillor Lee was planning to join us this evening, but he had a family emergency, so he couldn't join us. But he sent me some questions. I particularly wanted to ask about biodiversity and whether there's there is within the plans there is spaces for people to walk and so on, but there isn't. It doesn't. The comment is it doesn't seem to be a corridor for biodiversity. Is this something that we've missed? Is this something that we should be including? So we've got ways through the site. There's human ways through the site, but there's not a green corridor linking the park with the South Downs Way, for instance.
I think that will be tricky because there are houses to the north, there are buildings to the east, and there is a car park to the south. Obviously, the rules for biodiversity net gain will apply because I think they're national. They'll be in the NPPF. And it is for the developer to tell us how they're planning to address those points. But I think it might be useful for Councillor Lee to go and have a look at the immediate area to understand what the constraints are.
Thank you. Right, so we have, and I understand Councillor Batho, you have already stated you have questions for exempt. So could I ask somebody to propose and somebody else to second exempt? Thank you, Councillor Power. Thank you, Councillor Pett. We will now be moving into exempt sessions, so please could I ask you both to leave the room? Thank you. Would you like to return afterwards? Would you like somebody to take you somewhere where you can sit or? No, okay. Thank you for your time this evening.